People often say that there is a war against nature and that this is the Third World War.
It's getting more stark, it's getting worse, and the rate of change is accelerating, whether we're talking about the extinction of species or the thoroughness of the technoculture.
The world right now is frankly very frightening. For what we consider to be industrial civilization, I would say is extraordinarily uncivilized, actually quite savage.
It's not an exaggeration to say that we're living in an ecological apocalypse.
Between the years 1980 and 2045, we will lose more species of plants and animals than have been lost in the last 65 million years.
We have two big picture time pressures that really mean we should be acting a lot more urgently than most of us have. And one of them is peak oil or energy collapse, and one of them is climate change or runaway global warming.
I think that most people, even most scientists, continue to underestimate how far down the path to climate catastrophe we've already traveled.
For the most part, we're oblivious to it. We don't want to know about it. We don't want to hear about it.
The one thing I'm most afraid of is that we're going to mount a tremendous campaign to sustain the unsustainable.
At this point, the scientists are saying that the Earth's temperature may increase by as much as 10 degrees. At that point, there may not even be bacteria left.
When the oil starts to really run dry, and when those in power have to assert their power in a time of dwindling resources, I think they're going to turn to much more blunt and cruel methods of enforcing their power.
The whole climate is changing. The winds, the ocean currents, the storm patterns, snowpack, snowmelt, flooding, droughts.
It's stunning how fast the destruction is proceeding. Every day that passes, the world is in worse shape.
The sad-looking man you see on the screen is Derrick Jensen. Jensen is the best-selling author of several non-fiction books, including A Language Older Than Words and A Culture of Make-Believe. His books deal with topics such as surveillance, child abuse, the environment, and something he calls civilization. But it's statements like these that make him so controversial.
They're thinking of raising the Shasta Dam in California, and the reason that Senator Feinstein gave was, it is Californians' God-given right to water their lawns. You know, there is no way to argue with that, except with explosives.
That was Mr. Jensen in 2006. The same year he published a 2-volume set called Endgame. In Endgame, he argues that there is an urgent need to bring down civilization.
If people would have brought down civilization 100 years ago, people in the Pacific Northwest could still eat salmon. There's going to be people sitting along the Columbia 50 years from now, and they'll be glowing for one thing, but they'll be starving to death, and they'll be saying, I'm starving to death because you didn't take out the dams that killed salmon. And those dams were used for barging and for electricity, for aluminum smelters, for beer cans. So, God damn you.
He lays out his case against civilization by enumerating 20 premises. Due to time limitations and the fact that most people would not tolerate a 20-hour movie, we will explore 4 of these premises and accompany them with real-life examples.
Industrial civilization, civilization itself, but especially industrial civilization, is not and can never be sustainable. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that any way of life that's based on the use of non-renewable resources won't last. Civilization is a way of life characterized by the growth of cities.
So you've got groups of people living in a dense enough population that the local land base cannot support them. What that means is you have to get your basic resources from somewhere else because you've used them up where you live. So you're going to go out into the countryside and gather up whatever it is you want, bring it back in.
If you require the importation of resources, what that means is you've denuded the landscape of that particular resource.
There's no way that in the long term you can continue to destroy the land that you need for your survival or the waters that you need to drink and expect to continue to live.
Industrial civilization requires ever-increasing amounts of energy and ever-increasing amounts of land, ever-increasing amounts of resources of all kinds in order to perpetuate itself, in order to continue to grow, in order to just maintain itself. And we live on a finite planet, and those aren't available. Of course, unfortunately for us and most living creatures, that culture won't stop until it's consumed as much as it can, or of course until we stop it ourselves.
If you have a finite amount of anything, if you start using it, eventually you use it up. And so it would seem that if your entire culture is based on, I don't know, let's take a random resource, oil, that you would think about what's going to happen when the oil runs out.
We found energy resources that have allowed us to escape some of the kinds of limits that previous cultures have had to face much more quickly.
It used to collapse because they ran out of resources, easily accessible resources, the limit being the distance that people could travel with things like horses or other pack animals. That ended with the beginning of the fossil fuel age. Now they can go all over the planet and take what they want. So globalization has only accelerated this tremendously destructive process.
We've poured our wealth into building an infrastructure for daily life that has no future. I do think that the oil problem is going to accelerate within the next 3 to 5 years, maybe even sooner. The numbers indicate that we've probably peaked in global production.
Where do you find the break from that? I mean, it's all of it is a giant machine or ensemble that just moves forward. Technology, for example, never takes a step back. This whole thing just keeps going like a cancer.
I don't know of any civilization that's been sustainable. I don't believe there ever has been one. Technology, really in its essence, is our culture's determination that comes from certain philosophical and historical sources that we will be nothing else but more relentlessly technological.
There is no clean green path to living at a lifestyle that we are all used to in industrialized nations. This way of life is over.
Civilizations are often cutting their own throats very visibly, very obviously, but they just keep on doing it.
Every civilization is defined by hubris. It's defined by its denial to recognize that it lives in a natural world. As a matter of fact, every civilization in its founding lies elevates itself above nature and claims that it is the controller of the whole world.